Now, according to KPMG International's 2013 Global Construction Survey, the majority of companies in the global engineering and construction sector have fresh confidence in growth prospects for the industry. Now, Gavin Mail, who is African construction leader at KPMG, joins us for more. Good morning, Gavin. First, tell us about the survey, how you do it, and how you arrive at these conclusions.
Morning, David, and morning, viewers. This is the 8th year that KPMG has done the survey globally. We interviewed 165 organizations around the globe. In most cases, we tried to interview the CEO themselves. So staying away from the financial people, but looking at the people that are actually involved with the day-to-day running of the business.
And have to decide, make big decisions, I suppose.
And as you're aware, it hasn't been an easy period the last 5 or 6 years. So we've interviewed these face-to-face interviews, and so we get a good feel of what their business is about. As I said, 165 globally. 10 companies within South Africa. I personally did those interviews with one of my assistants. So we sat with the CEOs, we understood their business, and we got the views in terms of the global questionnaire, and we fed those results into our number crunching engine in the States, and that's what we're releasing today.
Must have been fascinating. Perhaps just give us a slice of what it was like. How long did you spend with them? Are they defensive? Are they? What was the mood generally, if you could sum it up, from the South African chief executives?
David, I think you've got to look at the time these interviews took place. So we did these interviews during June, July. Now that was right in the middle of the Competition Commission coming out with their the letters that they were being issued to everybody. So the mood at the time, to a certain extent, I think there was some relief that we've reached a new checkpoint in the industry in terms of getting clarity of where we stand. And I think it's very well recorded in terms of the size of some of these penalties, and they've all admitted to the majority of the incidences, and it's something that's now behind them. So the mood was very open with us, and at the time not all the companies had received their letters, so they weren't aware, or if they had discussions, they weren't able to divulge it to us.
How defensive were they? Because one's had a mixed signal, I believe, coming from the construction industry. On the one hand, they've said, okay, we'll pay up, and they've paid, and they've kind of admitted it. And Roger Jardine, the outgoing chief executive at Avenge, actually made some very harsh comments about his predecessors and others in the industry. On the other hand, you talk to people behind the scenes and they say, look, a lot of this wasn't collusion, a lot of it was restricted. If we hadn't colluded, we wouldn't have finished the World Cup stadiums. But we've paid up to get this off our backs.
David, this thing could drag on forever and ever and ever. So in the reality, you had to get this thing over with. Now, a lot of the CEOs that were in place supposedly during this collusion period, and some of the things that you hear are frightening. But as you mentioned, there was a certain pragmaticness in terms of getting things done. Nobody wanted to go and build a road in a region where they don't have any vehicles or infrastructure to do it. So yes, the Competition Commission sees that as carving up markets. But in reality, there obviously were real incidents of collusion and losers' fees and things like that. So
you're implying some acceptable behaviours and some unacceptable behaviours got blurred, perhaps?
Yeah, it's always going to be difficult to prove that, because in all the companies there's been a change of personnel. So I think the current CEOs that are in place, one of their biggest missions, and I know in all the companies we deal with, which are at least 5 of the top 8 companies around, that the new CEOs have put in regimes and education and training, because competition issues arise not at the top level, but sometimes at the ground level.
Let's look at the prospects for the industry in South Africa particularly, but also globally, because there's a context that your global survey has obviously looked at. It strikes me it's one of those sectors, a bit like mining, but it's different to mining in the sense mining has a long lead time, takes a long time before you get your money back, but at least then you mine for a period. Construction, you have these massive projects which then end completely and you have to start again. So that pipeline is very important, the ratio of order book to revenue they talk about. How are our companies looking in terms of what's coming down the line, and have they the capacity to do what they're supposed to do, or are they too much capacity?
David, interesting question, and I'll handle it by first of all talking about the pipelines or the order books. And I'll cover both the global perspective as well as the South African local perspective. So globally, there's good news. The good news is that the order books, or backlogs as they generally call it, are improving. So in the year now 2013, 54% of the companies that we interviewed said that their order book will be up by more than 5% on the previous year. So that's a real positive sign. But even more positive is that 7 out of the 10 South African companies said their order book would be up by more than 10%. Now that's significantly better than the global average. So order book looks fantastic, but order book doesn't mean revenue because of the margin you mentioned. So we then had to say, well, what is happening in the margin? Now the South African margins for the year 2012 compared to the global average were down significantly compared to the global. And a lot of that is to do with finishing off projects and some of these big loss-making projects that exist. Going ahead though, this year 2013, the outlook is a lot better. So 81% of companies globally, that's 4 out of 5, are saying that they'll either have stable margins, this is not their profit, but the margins on their projects, stable margins or improved margins by 1 or 2%. Now, that sounds like a small percentage, but it's percentage points improvements. And in the construction industry, that generally in good times are running at 8%, that's a significant improvement. So 81%, 4 out of 5, are saying stable or improved. South Africa, 40% are saying they'll be up by more than 1%. And that's better than the global average of 27%. So it's looking real good. If I can just continue then, we said, when are we going to see this real turnaround? And interestingly, the majority, I think 2/3 of companies said 2 to 5 years' time. So it's not now in the short term, unless you happen to be in America.
But now, are we in good shape in South Africa? Because if you haven't got too much work, you can't keep the people, and maybe you go make commitments in other countries, which mean you haven't got capacity to. So are we? Is this industry in shape to do what's needed?
In South Africa, and that's a good question, because I've been involved for the 8 years. And in the 8 years, you've seen skill shortages, you've seen raw material shortages, and you've seen the exact opposite. And you've seen the power shift from the contractor to the project owner in terms of who has the power to negotiate and pull the strings. So one of the big learnings was keep your top people, your project managers, the guys that are instrumental in running proper projects. And if we have time, we can talk about these big projects that are causing distress.
Well, let's just talk about one of them, which is Eskom. Everyone knows about that. And one hears that the project management skills in the big power station projects are not what they should be.
David, I only have hearsay. I'm not involved at all there. But I think the situation is far more complex with that. Eskom are building some of the biggest power stations in the world. They haven't built power stations for a long time. And there's lots of other issues, including labor challenges, that are not going as smoothly as one would like. So as an outsider hearing what's coming through the system, you expect, it would have been difficult at the initiation stage of this project to expect some of the issues that are coming out. And labor is probably one of the challenging ones, where people have been employed on what they call LDCs, limited duration contracts. So their objective is not to finish.
Yes, that's right. Why finish? You won't
then
get
they
paid.
don't have work.
Yeah. Gavin, we'll have to stop there. It's a fascinating subject, but you have this survey, the Global KPMG Mining Survey. Where can we get that? Is it available websites and so on?
David, it'll be on our website, www.kpmg.co.za tomorrow.
And then you look for the mining survey, so the construction survey rather. That would be the way to do it. Thanks to Gavin Mail, who is African construction leader at KPMG.